Great.
Okay, you are all set. It's recording.
Thank you. Great. Shane Wells. Stephanie Arroyo.
Here.
Shirley Glennon.
Here.
Brian Lindsay.
Here.
Jessica Boudreau.
Here.
Christine Gabriel.
Here.
Kathy Brosnan. Sue Levinson, yes. Rosalind Shaka. Kelly Gordon.
Here.
Bruce Patrick.
Yeah.
Debbie Hinrichsen.
Here.
Misty Lowe.
Here.
Erica Helm.
Here.
Terry McMahon. Okay, so we've got 4 from each board. We've got 4 members, so we do have a quorum. I don't think there's any public in the meeting room.
No.
All right, so we'll move past public comment. Right into the approval of the minutes of April 13th, 2020 on page 4.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of April 13th, 2020, both public and non-public. There were non-public too, right? I remember going into non-public.
Yeah, I'll second.
All right, we can go through each page as we typically do. If you have changes, you can make note. Or anything?
Yeah, line 18. Mr. Winslow is the vice chair.
Okay,
Good catch.
19.
all right. Moving on to page 5. Page 7. Anything on page 9? Pages for page 10. And on page 11. Looks like we need some times in there.
I have line 289 should be Ms. Lowe, line 290 should be Ms. Helm, and the time is 8:52. I don't have the information for the adjournment.
Okay. I have 9:01 for the final adjournment. And I have Erica as the motion. And I think Christine as the second.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Is there anything, any other comments or changes to the meeting minutes?
Just that those additions also needed to be added to the non-public session meeting minutes. Ms. Lowe made the motion, Ms. Helm seconded, and they came out at 8:52.
Right. Okay, so we've got Lowe, Helm, 8:52, and then Erica and Christine at 9:01 on the second section.
And my last name is misspelled in the non-public
Okay.
at the top.
What line are you on?
Oh, sorry. Of the non-public, I don't know if it matters, but my last name is misspelled. There's an extra R.
Okay. All right, so we'll make those changes. All right, is there anything else for changes? All right, all those in favor? Oh, well, actually, sorry, we're gonna, Stephanie,
Yes.
Shirley,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Susan, yes, Roz? Okay, Kelly,
Yes.
Bruce,
Abstain.
Debbie,
Yes.
Misty,
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
So we have 11 in favor with 1 abstention. That was easy this week. That was this time. All right, we move on to the Business Administrator's Report on page 12 with the review of financial SAU and preschool. Mr. Waring has provided a report on starting on page 12.
Yes, so page 12 is just the memo summarizing the reports that are included in the packet. Page 13 is the revenue for both the general fund at the SAU as well as preschool. Page 14 is a summary of the SAU expenditures by function. Page 15 is a summary of expenditure lines that at this point are showing a projection to be over expended by more than $1,000. Page 16 is a summary of all of the health, dental, long-term disability, life insurance lines throughout the budget. And then from pages 17 through 19 are the full detail line item expenditures of the SAU budget. And then
I have a question.
Yep, go right ahead.
On page in our packet, it is page 18 in our packet. I think we've talked about this one before. The New Hampshire retirement for the student service director, we still have a budget balance of, I think it says $4,570. And I wasn't sure why, I think we asked that question before, why it wasn't encumbered
You
or,
did, and it is encumbered correctly.
okay.
I have checked the math off of the projected and encumbered wages, and it matches up with what is projected to be expended from that line.
So does that mean we over budgeted that line by $8,500?
I can't speak to how the budget number was arrived at. I have checked the encumbrances, and what I have confirmed is that the number, the expenditure and projected expenditure does line up with the salaries that correspond with that expenditure.
Debbie, which line are you on? Just so everyone can hone in on that.
It's on in our packet. It's page 18,
Yep.
and then if you look, it's student service director.
Just about the middle.
I'm trying. It's very hard to read the numbers because they're very faded. The last few numbers, I think it is 5230001. It's the New Hampshire. It's NHRS. It's New Hampshire Retirement System. Student Service Director Assistant. And you see it was budgeted. I think it says 23,000 plus. But if you look at the budget balance, there's $8,570 left in that line. Does everybody see that?
Is some of it
so that's-
preschool? Did it get double
I can't
budgeted? I wonder if it got double budgeted because the position split with preschool, right?
It shouldn't be. The position, it should be budgeted in the preschool budget, but
Okay.
there's only half for salaries in here.
Okay.
It's based on a percentage. But anyway, so thank you for finding that out. That's interesting. I don't know how we arrived at that budgeted amount. That's interesting. Thank you.
It's good. Now,
Welcome.
so you know, and it's been double checked, so that's
Right.
good.
Right. Okay.
So on the end of page 19, budget balance is showing $36,000, $120.55.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Would it be possible for us to go back to the summary page on page 15? Where you were making a note that there was an overspend of budget, perhaps I misunderstood. Because the overall budget is not at this point in jeopardy of overexpending?
No, if you go back one more page to page 14, that summarizes the full budget. And it's still, we're matching the, we're showing the surplus, projected surplus of $36,000.
Okay, I just somewhere in there thought I heard $1,000, so I.
No, so
Yeah,
page,
he-
right, so page 15, Sue, is just pulling out the individual budget lines that are showing a projected overspend by more than $1,000
For those, okay,
for these specific lines.
right. Okay. And the last item does have an offset in the budget on a different line.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So Glenn, I'm sorry. So Glenn, you feel pretty confident in these numbers right now?
Yeah, I mean, and I think certainly as we get through May, we'll be able to feel more comfortable with what the projected surplus is. We definitely still have some more reconciling to do and some house cleaning to do, but I would feel comfortable that that's a number you can feel comfortable. It's not going to be less than that. I wouldn't expect.
Okay, good.
Mrs. Levinson? Sorry to interrupt. I know that I'm recording this for notes and I'm getting a lot of background feedback. So I'm afraid that Amelia will as well. So if you're not speaking, it might be best to mute yourself, especially with the shuffling of the papers, because it is blocking over the person who's speaking at times. So
Okay.
that's it. Just a recommendation.
I am hearing voices or something in the back.
I think what's happening is if you don't have a mic and headphones, you're hearing the person speak back through the speakers. So that's what I was saying. If you're not speaking, to mute it, and it will stop the feedback that we're getting.
Okay.
Any other questions on the revenues or expenditure pages? And then the last 3 or 4 pages are the grants specific to the SAU. First one is on page 20. And it's a 2018-2019 IDA and preschool grant. And it does carry forward on or carry over onto page 21.
I do have questions on this. Okay, so this is the one grant that probably is closing. That was the consolidated grant before Stratford pulled out, correct, Nate?
I didn't run this report. I gave all those numbers to Glenn. I can pull it up. I don't know the grant code number by heart right now.
Yeah,
That's all districts.
it's all districts.
Yeah.
It's in the label.
I'm looking at the application. I have the application right here, so I can see it. This is the consolidated. Okay, so my question is about the school psychologist and then all the related fees. How, what's going on with that? Because I know that we budgeted that in the grant, right? So I don't understand why there's money left over from that. Do you see at the bottom of the page, maybe it's the sixth line up where it says there's 70, I think it says $78,000 left. Okay, so I just want to understand that. I know we pay our school psychologists out of our grant. Each district has a certain amount that they pay, and it comes when we were consolidated. When we were consolidating the grant, it came out of that. So why does it look like there's more money left in that line?
I don't have an answer for you today off the top of my head, but look, there was an adjustment that was made back to this line. That's why there's parentheses around it. It's in essence a negative credit. So it was credit going back in there, resulting in a $78,000 budget surplus. Scott, did you have something to add?
Well, it doesn't look like the budget amount is correct. See where the budget amount says 7,800?
Right.
You're right. You're right.
That should be 4 days and 3 days. So that's a lot more than, I think the actual budget number is misentered. Either somebody missed a decimal point. I mean, if it was 78,000, I'd be thinking that was.
Yeah, I'm just confused with that because I'm looking at what I believe is the application for this grant that I have, and the numbers aren't matching up there. For what's, well, obviously that first number is not correct, what we budgeted, what the grant was written for. But why would there be any money left over anyway? Because, you know, that's really where a large portion of our grant money goes to pay the school psychologists. Like a lot of our money goes there. So I don't understand why we have money left.
All right, I circled it, Nate and Glenn.
I'm pulling up that line right now.
I don't think it's going to show up in the grant application. I think it's going to be more research than that.
Yep,
Okay.
I agree.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe if you find out, could you send that to us before the next meeting, like rather than wait a month?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Because it says, I don't know, okay, the second page of grants, this continues. It says, now that grant I thought ended July or June 30th, 2020. Is that correct? The grant we're reading about.
You just switched to the second
Grants here.
You just switched to the second grant. Are you talking about the first grant or the second grant?
Okay, I thought he said that it was, that page goes over to the next page.
Page
Yeah,
21.
okay.
It
So
says
you're talking about
end
the
of
first
report. End of
So that
report.
grant-
Page.
That grant is good until September,
Okay.
and it's likely going to be good longer than that, given this COVID-19 thing. So, but that grant should end in September, correct, Nate? Originally?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I want to understand this. This is all the one consolidated grant. It's 2 pages. It starts on that page and it ends where it says end of report. It's not a second grant. It's the same grant, correct?
Right, the second grant's on the other page.
Okay.
Flip it.
All right. So where this is saying there's $80,000 left, and I'm thinking that's taking a big share of it from that line that says there's $78,000 left on the school psychologist line.
I can explain some of that if you.
Well, do you want to wait till you get all the information, or do you want to?
I can explain most of it if you wanted me to.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
you have your school psychologist in there twice. Remember, these grants carry over for multiple years. That's why. You have a budget amount for your school psychologist further down in the grant, which was about $122,000. And then because we didn't want to lose any money, we budgeted them in the future grants and realized we still had leftover money in this one. So we moved some of that money to this. So when it says it's $7,800 budgeted, it's because you only are paying a portion of this year's out of this old grant. The rest has already been paid for out of newer grants.
So since this grant ends September 1st,
So why you see that big credit there is because they overbilled that line when they shouldn't have. That $78,000 in salary shouldn't have come to this line. So they billed it, realized they were overbilling a grant, and moved it to the appropriate grants, which are newer grants.
Was this one of the findings that the auditors found?
No.
Oh, okay. So there is no $80,000 left in this grant? Or is
No.
this,
No, there's not. This grant, I can look at it right now on the school on the DOE website, and there is money left in it, but that's solely because it hasn't been allocated and paid yet. It just says amounts
Okay.
paid, but what's budgeted, when it says what's budgeted right now, I out of $462,000, 140 cents, $462,140.21. I have budgeted $461,561.97 is budgeted.
okay, so there's no $80,000 left. Good.
No.
I just wanted to make sure, because
Not,
if it expires in September 1st, we lose the money,
well,
right?
right. It just hasn't been billed to them yet. Remember, we can pay, it comes out of our costs in there, and then the state reimbursed. So they just haven't paid us that money back yet. So
Okay.
no, there's not that huge balance there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions on that, those 2 pages of grants, 20 and 21 on the 2018-19 grant?
Not on those two, no.
All right, and then on page 22, I think this is what we had in our packet last month. So that was just brought forward again because there were questions on that.
I just think people should understand this is just Northwood and Nottingham, because Stratford has its own, this is when we opened our own grant and did not consolidate it. So this grant, you know how Nate was saying they overlapped because they're 18 months long?
Right,
This grant is just for Northwood and Nottingham.
right, and you can see that at the top. Any questions or highlights on this one? I think there were some questions last time, but there was a little uncertainty about it, so it was brought forward again. Okay. Okay, well. Does anyone have any additional questions on the financials, the SAU or the preschool financials? Any thoughts, comments? Yes, Mr.
Well,
Yes?
Hey,
Yes, Bruce?
I'd like to reserve comments when we get to the audit on the budget too, and refer back to it, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I also think since we have the Northwood Nottingham grant in here, we probably should just have the Stratford one too, because the SAU is managing that as well. It just makes sense for everybody to see where everything's going.
The Stratford specific budgets were included in the Stratford financial packet for the Stratford School Board.
Right. No, I understand that, but I mean for the SAU, since we're all looking at Northwood and Nottingham, I don't see why we're not sharing all of it.
Well, these were shared because they were combined grants. They're not a grant specific to one district. And so any grant that was specific to one district was included in that district's respective financial packet.
Which makes sense.
Okay. All right, anything else on this section? All right, then. Thank you. We'll move on to the superintendent's report.
There's no personnel report in the packet for you. However, I will need a non-public at the end of the meeting. COVID-19 update, had the CARES Act and ESSER funds webinar this morning that allows us to now apply for those funds on behalf of your individual districts. So as soon as the grant management system opens up, we'll be able to get to work on all of that. I am going to form an advisory committee with the administrators, nurses, and guidance counselors to make recommendations to me and to make sure all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed when it comes to developing different options for instruction in the fall. I'll be putting that committee together. We likely won't meet until after the state recommendations come out at the end of June. And then whatever good work that they do, I will bring to your individual boards and make recommendations about different options for the fall. Other than that, I think I cover a lot of this in your individual meetings. Do you have any questions for me about that?
I have 2 questions for you.
Yep.
I have question 1 is, we discussed in Nottingham on last Wednesday, the submission on April 15th of the costs associated with COVID at this point. And I'm wondering if we have a sense of that. I guess it was done SAU wide.
Yeah.
And my second question relates to, have they come back yet in regard to, is it Title I, or how are they estimating the 85%?
Well, there's 2 pieces to that. So why don't I have Glenn answer your first. So what, actually I can answer them both. So what had happened is the SAU sent a spreadsheet asking us to track expenses by SAU, not individual districts. Doesn't matter, we can do that. All we need to do is break out the individual districts and the SAU from that spreadsheet and then present the information to the individual boards. So I believe Glenn is working on that.
Yes.
The SAU expenses really are going to be the cost of DocuSign, the cost of Zoom, maybe if people needed to increase their internet speeds so they could work, small items like that. I'm not looking for, I don't think there's a lot of expenses at the SAU level. I don't think there's a lot of expenses right now at the school level, but I am nervous that our real expenses are going to come in the next fiscal year. The grant is set up to go to September of 2021. So you can go retroactive until March 13th. So we'll just thoughtfully continue to gather the information and then present it back to the boards and find out what they'd like to do. Your question was about Title I or Title II, right?
Yes.
So the issue is, as far as figuring out the money amount, it'll be between 80 and 85% of your Title I allocation, although it doesn't need to be used for Title I. The Title II issue comes into play when we're talking about equitable services. So in Title I, equitable services say if there's a private school within the confines of your district, then they're entitled to some of your equitable services money out of your grant. Title II's equitable service model, wait a minute, I just reversed that. Let me back up again. Title I, either Title I money follows, I'm sorry, Title I money follows the child. You provide the service in the title for the private school. So you provide, or the charter school. So that sort of follows the child. So if somebody needs Title I services and they're Title I eligible and they happen to go to Seacoast Charter School, we would do a calculation there. Title II is a little different. It has to do with the confines of your district. So it doesn't necessarily affect you folks. But some larger districts it is affecting. So there was a conversation, Congress has intended that it use the Title I equitable services model. And Secretary DeVos used the Title II, and now there's some activity in Congress to hold the administration to the Title I calculation. So we're just waiting for information on that. And I'm sorry that I was confusing and presenting a confusing topic, so I apologize for that. So it's not going to affect the amount of money that you get, it's how it's distributed. And the preference for the superintendents, and I even think for the DOE, is to use the Title I and not the Title II, because of the effect that'll have on your larger districts within the state. So that's where we're at with that, and we have no answer yet. But that did come up today.
I have a question. When you were mentioning earlier about the advisory committee, you'd said administration and nurses, and who else were you planning to?
Guidance, administration, nurses, facilities, and I certainly wouldn't mind peppering a couple of board members in there too.
I just wanted to have a rough idea. I didn't write fast.
Yeah. I mean, I need to consider things like, from a nurse's perspective, you know, do I have enough equipment? What equipment do I need? You know, and then from facilities, when it comes to cleaning, you know, what are the requirements? There's some state requirements. I need to check that out. The facilities directors. Guidance, I still think that we're going to have to do some closure and restart, and how we're going to check in on our kids, and because we just don't know what it's going to look like in the fall.
I just wanted to say that I think it's a great idea to have a task force to do that. I do think it may be wise to meet before the recommendations come down, even if it's to, you know, brainstorm things you're going to need to decide about, and, you know, things like that. I know decisions won't be getting made yet, but I think it would be smart to kind of get the conversation going.
Yeah, my intent is first put it together, then have a meet. At least do an organizational meeting. And I also have some templates on opening schools that I can share with them ahead of time, and that should get things moving.
So if you're looking for board members to be on the committee, should we do that tonight?
It really is up to the individual districts on who they'd like to send as a representative. You can do it tonight, you can do it at your individual meetings, it doesn't matter to me.
So the one concern that I would have around that, I think it's good to have the collegiality of everyone talking together, but we do have different CBAs, we have different, we have a lot of differences in the schools as well. So I would assume that our individual teams and the individuals that we have locally that we budget for and pay locally will be able to streamline things for what's best for each district.
That's the intent. Actually, the intent for me, it's to have an advisory committee to make recommendations to each of your individual boards, and each of you are in different situations. For instance, here's a universal one. If we're required to social distance on the bus, what is that going to look like? That's pretty universal, right? Because buses are the same size. But if we're required to social distance within the classroom, while the frame may be the same, the size of the classrooms may be different. The number of kids you can get in on a 3-foot radius to a desk is different. So there's going to have to be a lot of local decision making that goes along with that. Because for one thing, 3 reopening plans are going to look different for 3 different places. Drop-off patterns, traffic patterns, all sorts of things. So.
Right. Okay. Are there any other questions around the superintendent's report? Okay, thank you. Moving on to the student services director report.
Yep, I don't have a report enclosed. Much like Mr. Rooney, we've been working together trying to figure out what it's going to look like for reopening, and what I've been focusing my energy on right now for each district is what it would look like to try to offer ESY services. We're supposed to be getting some more guidance here in the summer, shortly for about summer services. I know the way that I would like to move forward with this based on the health needs of our students and staff. I plan on sharing that at each local board because regardless of what is shared with the update, hearing everything I've heard and read from CDC, I'm just not sure that in-building summer services are going to be able to be given. I really don't think it's safe for our students or our staff. And I can get into that in more detail if you would like now. Some of the things that I've thought about would have to take place for us to even consider bringing students in the building. That's really been my major focus outside of just the typical day-to-day. That's been the major focus on what it might look like.
I would love for you to elaborate a little bit on what you'd like to see before you think it's a good idea to have staff and students back in the building.
Well, first of all, what we'd have to do for ESY, I'm only speaking of ESY right now because that's the special education summer school. You would need to look at, before a student could step on the bus, their temperature would need to be taken. The bus driver cannot take their temperature. So you have to send an adult on that bus with them. You need to make sure that they haven't had any symptoms. So there should be a short, maybe 3 to 5 page questionnaire, 5 question questionnaire to the families about what they've come in contact of, where they've been, what's going on, have they had any symptoms, have they had headaches, in addition to the fever. Then as the student walks on the bus, someone needs to go by and wipe down each seat that they've touched as they go through the bus, because they're going to continue to touch the seats as they go in. And then you have that person riding the bus to make sure you keep them distance. Now, typically speaking, you have about 22 to 26 students per district for ESY. So you could fit them on one large bus. So instead of running a small bus, you'd have to run a large bus, separating them, keeping those seats separate, and again, wiping those seats down by an adult. You would have to have a holding room in your school by a nurse. So if someone becomes symptomatic while they're there, you need to separate them. And what would that look like? And how could you do that? Related services. So if you built these small little cohorts of say 4 to 6 students in a classroom to make sure that you have a cohort, what does it look like if you have a related service person going into each one of those separate classrooms? Now you're no longer separating the cohort. So now you're bringing those germs back and forth. You would need to have a janitor staffed outside the restroom. So every time a student went into the bathroom and out of the bathroom, it could be wiped down and cleaned. These are just some of the different issues. So I look at that and say, what is the practicality of being able to get all that there? Then the next step is you have to think about, these students have not seen their friends or teachers. How do you get a first grader to not run up to their buddy and hug them the moment they see them and say, hey, I'm gonna go give you a hug? And then at that point, you've created a little bit of an issue. I think it is that slow entry going back into the groups that I'd love to see people be able to do over the summer. So they're not just running straight into a friend right away, because if they're able to do that over the summer with their friends and family, as this loosens up, maybe when they re-enter the school, it won't be as huge. Yeah.
I would add to that, like, the bus rides are so chaotic as it is. We already know there's no way we're going to social distance kids on a bus. Even if we have the space, you have to have 3 or 4 adults to keep them separated in their seats, to not play with their friends. And to add to that, this is so contagious when people are asymptomatic. Even if we're taking temperatures and things, we're doing a lot of work for probably a very minimal return. I just don't see how really social distancing in the building is going to work, especially with the
Erica
younger.
has a comment as well.
They've done the calculation on buses, and you can get 13 kids on a full-size bus and keep them socially distanced.
Yeah.
And playgrounds are shut down. So
Yes.
you also are bringing kids in, and they can't be out on the playground.
Right. There's a lot of things that when you look at it, it's not very conducive to a friendly learning environment for these students as you're trying to reintegrate them back into the building. while I wish we could, without knowing the real, as you said, the asymptomatic, you don't know what's going on. I just don't find it to be successful. I personally also feel that when the boards make their decisions about whether they're going to have students back in or not, as we give you some recommendations, we want to let families know as soon as possible so that they can start planning. I do believe we can do a good job doing ESY remotely, and I really do believe that if we do ESY remotely, we'll be able to give a lot of directed service, because what we'll be able to do is sometimes we've had students come for the 3-hour day when they might have only really needed the reading, and trying to keep them engaged for 3 hours of reading wasn't easy. But if we give an hour of directed reading in either a one-on-one or a very small cohort online, we're going to be able to give them really nice services over ESY. So when I'm looking at that, I'm just looking at that there's some really hard things. The other part of that is, how do you keep a kid to keep their face mask on, right? So they're going to need to be wearing a mask to start. And I think that's what Mr. Ruding was alluding to. Like, we have to come up with some really, as a group, figure out how we're going to do this and what it's going to look like. So we all know that kindergartens, 8th graders don't always remember to bring their stuff to school. So what do we do if they get out of their car, they go to walk in the building and realize they've left their mask in the car? So can we get them a mask? Do we have enough spare masks at the school? Are we going to be able to supply them and get them back? That kind of thing. Are we going to be offering N95 masks, or are we going to be looking at normal cloth fabric masks right now? So these are all the different things that we look at. And I will tell you that I've surveyed the special ed staff, and more than half of them would like to be back in the building. Almost all of them, I would say. The problem is they just don't know the uncertainty of it. Most of our staff would very much like to put this remote learning behind them. While some of the staff is really blossoming, just like our students, it's still not easy. So,
Nate, would this recommend?
I'm sorry, Debbie, Misty was asking first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry. I know this is hard. Nate, I agree with everything that you just said. I think that's just a little bit of what we see coming our way at the local level when school opens in the fall, if it opens in the fall. So that's a huge eye opener I think we all need to think about. My question to you regarding ESY specifically, again, I agree with everything you said, but I worry very much about our most vulnerable learners, where this distance learning is so tremendously difficult. I think for the majority of kids, what you said is spot on regarding 30 minutes of reading or other direct instruction opportunities. But for our kiddos that really require a more, even one-to-one, I don't know if there's any thought of bringing kids in. I know you work very closely with the Seacoast directors, and I'm sure your thought process is very much in line with area directors. But I wonder if there's been any conversation about those really, really involved kids.
So there has. And one of the things that we talked about with some of those very involved students, the students who don't have the communication skills, or the students who need someone there to help them on a regular basis, those are also our most susceptible to get sick, because they can't tell us how they're feeling or what's going on. Yeah. My area directors all feel the same way that I do. We've been bouncing that off too. None of them want to bring students in right now. Okay. There's that big concern. I will say, and this has not been anything that hasn't been shared by the Commissioner of Education. They are still saying that we can offer small cohorts in the buildings with our students now. Nobody wants to do that though. No director wants to open up that Pandora's box, because what do you do the first time you bring a student in, like you said, some of those really significant students, and they get sick in your building because you couldn't protect them, or your staff member gets sick. And then you're taking your most vulnerable students and saying, it's not safe for other students, but it's safe for these students. So you have some discrimination there. And we brought that up, and I'm not trying to say anyone's doing anything wrong. They do have that 6-foot mark, but really, if with those specific students in mind, you need to be closer than 6 feet anyway. So to try to keep your social distancing and still help a student who needs that much support, you can't keep your social distancing correctly anyway. So that becomes an issue. So one of the things that I'll get to you one sec, Shirley. One of the things that you really want to look at is we have been trying to get our related services like Constellation Speech. All those things have been touching base with homes. The Northwood School has the NEC program, and the NEC educators have been reaching out and working with parents at home and offering suggestions. While it's not as good as and robust as what we could do in the building when it comes to those specific behavioral and supports, we still have been trying to keep in contact with them all throughout. Did that answer your question, Misty?
Yes, thank you.
One quick thing before we go on to more questions. I know Debbie has one, but I'm also looking at this phone, 5449, and I'm not sure if that's a board member that's come in via phone.
Yeah, I wasn't sure either. I brought them in. I figured I don't know the number. I figured during non-public we would unmute them and see. I can try to unmute them now if you would like.
Maybe just ask if it's a board member so they can participate via phone.
Okay, last two digits, 49. If you want to just let us know if you are a board member, I'm going to unmute you.
No, it's Ellen Gibson, just a member of the public.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hi, Ellen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just wanted to check.
Yeah, not a problem.
I think Debbie was up next, and also Shirley had a comment.
Debbie?
So Nate, is your recommendation also applying to preschool, I would assume? Because we've had this discussion with starting our new preschool about setting up the ESY program this summer.
My recommend. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
I've asked my question.
Oh, yes. My recommendation would be the same for the preschool, would be to try to offer it as best we can remotely. Again, these students would be even more vulnerable because they definitely wouldn't be able to tell you what's going on, how they're feeling. It would be harder for us to keep them safe with a face mask on, keeping them from touching things, keeping them from touching their mouths, their eyes, and then touching other students. It'd be very hard to keep them that 6 foot separate right now as we're being asked to and required to.
So since many of them aren't verbal, or their verbal skills are very limited because most of their identifications are language-based skills, language-based, how would they receive the services remotely?
That is still something I'm working on right now. I can't answer that question. I mean, it'd be very similar to how they're receiving services now. It would be, we'd be giving parents, parents, guardians, some strategies to use at home, some suggestions and tasks to practice with, maybe some materials that could be handed out as Stratford was doing today and yesterday. I believe parents were coming by and picking some stuff up. Stuff that was left behind. We could do the same thing where we have some materials put together and they could come and pick them up. That's how I would see this going right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Shirley, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, my feedback was just that if we do get to a point where there's some more discussion leaning towards on-site, I think it would be worth to survey the parents and the support staff. I'm sure you guys are doing this type of thing anyways, and to look into maybe some possible outdoor learning in smaller groups, so you don't have to be in the building, and have a couple windows during the week, even if it's a once a week and a hybrid of the remote learning. I would recommend Kelly for some feedback on great outdoor learning environments, because Seacoast Charter has some great outdoor classroom setups, and look into maybe some of those options, because it may save a lot of that hassle with the using the building, if we can use some of the good weather to our advantage and help distance that way and just keep the groups smaller. If we really need to get some on-site for, some of our most at risk or people who really are struggling with the remote aspect and have the ESY needs.
Okay.
So at this point, do you think that we will in the districts have some compensatory services that are going to need to be as this progresses?
So that's a very tricky question, because right now the compensatory services are really tied towards when a district refuses to offer services. We're not refusing to offer anything. We would love to be able to offer something. This pandemic is getting in the way, and when you look at compensatory services and the way that the language was written, none of this was thought of. So right now, what it's really looking at is, I mean, I know that my organizations, all the organizations are reaching out to Congress saying you need to relook at the way compensatory services it works right now. And one of the other factors for compensatory services isn't just are we denying them services, it also looks at how the other students are progressing forwards and what learning opportunities have they had that you have denied your special ed students. And at this point, we've not denied our special ed students anything that we haven't offered to our regular ed students. And I just don't feel that we are at that spot right now. I think some parents could say, you know, you said you would offer this and you only offer, you said you're going to offer A and you gave B. Well, we were going to offer A to all students and we gave B to all students. So we didn't deny any specific student anything. This pandemic is really got in the way of us being able to provide the services that we were accustomed to across the board. So could there be some compensatory services down the line? There could be. But also compensatory services as they're guidelined are through the court process. And if you think about just even in New Hampshire, New Hampshire is one of the smaller states when it comes to the population of special ed, right? Because we have a smaller population of students. If you were to think about all those students needing compensatory services, and to do it correctly, they'd have to go through the court system. I don't know how that's going to look. I don't even think the court system could manage that. And that's why we're looking at it as how do we best serve this and how do we look at what compensatory service guideline was meant to cover versus to what it's being referenced to now. Okay.
Thank you.
I don't know if that answered it. I know it was a little long-winded, but that's kind of the way I see it happening.
Just one of those things that could be building
Yes.
behind us that we.
Yeah. And it should be very student specific, just like ESY. So that was the other thing. You know, I want to be very clear. Your ESY numbers did not go up due to this because ESY was not meant to cover any learning loss due to a pandemic. ESY was geared towards, was there an emerging skill and or would it be due to regression? Well, we have to go by the information that we had ahead of time. We can't project that additional regression would have taken place because that wouldn't be fair to do when we don't have that information for all students yet. So I do believe this is going to be a long-term thing where we're going to have to, as Mr. Rooney shared before, we're going to have to assess every student, where they were when they left and where they are now, to really warrant regular ed and special ed to see what kind of learning loss took place. And I believe Mr. Rooney shared that we haven't had a lot of expense now, but looking down the line, I mean, this summer might not be a spot to catch students up. It could be the following summer might need to be used to help, you know, catch up students. I mean, Erica and Misty, who both have strong special ed backgrounds, they understand that testing is used to determine whether students are eligible or not eligible. Well, we test off of a baseline, off of an average. Those numbers are going to be skewed now. If you look at the fact that some of our students have just lost 6 months of their schooling, and if it's in the primary grades, first, second, and third grade, then if we're basing their numbers of where they should have been off of the students from 2 and 3 years ago, that's not going to be really, that's going to skew numbers. That's going to skew identifications, because you potentially have students who are coming up with learning gaps, but it's not because they are learning disabled. It's not because they have a specific learning disability or a special ed need. It's because they didn't have schooling for quite some time, and it's displaying in a different way. I don't know if both Ms. Helm and Ms. Lowe would agree with me, but you do have that to look at, and it's going to be a tricky situation as we get back. For schools, it's going to be a multi-year setup to just get back to normal.
I have a question.
Yep.
Have we provided any speech, physical, or occupational therapy up to this point?
Yes, we have. The related services have been reaching out to families with and students who have received those services before. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Do we have any other questions on this area? I'm sure this is going to be an ongoing area of
Yes.
discussion.
I'm going to just say one more thing because this is just close to my heart, is that when we're talking about looking at our incurred costs that we're expecting to, I think that it goes without saying we'll have to really bolster some expectations for behavioral and emotional health, since the bulk of our, actually all of our students are experiencing trauma at this point. So that's going to be a cost that we can project now that we're going to need over the next year.
I think contract counseling is going to be, and it's going to present as behaviors, it's going to present as a lot of stuff. But the crux comes back down to the trauma reaction, and that's mental health and not behavioral. Yeah.
Right. Sorry, that's what I meant, but
Yeah.
it show itself through.
I'm sorry to agree with you. Sorry.
I think it's
I
going to
also
be a real
just-
issue for kids that that suddenly are not where they want to be, if you will. I mean, you're going to get back to school and you're going to start having some, RTI probing or what have you, and all of a sudden, kids are going to have to be catching up, and that's going to be, for these kids, I'm sure that's going to be emotionally devastating for some of them, and I think parents are also going to be quite upset. So I do think that if we can do anything over the summer in terms of even, you were talking about packets that could go home. I know Nottingham does a program now, but we should probably be thinking about whatever we can do to try to maintain for these kids. With that said, I'm sure there's exhaustion going on too, because they're working hard, but they're not, receiving the same amount of instruction and help they would have had one-on-one in a classroom.
I just also wanted to note the importance, I think, around in the realm of special education, the importance of parent participation throughout this whole process. And compensatory implies that schools have done something wrong.
Right.
We have not done anything wrong. What we're going to have to figure out is what additional supports and services our kids might need due to this new remote distance learning that we're experiencing.
Yeah. The reason why I asked about compensatory, Misty, is because on that call with the commissioner, he brought it up. And
No, I understand.
I'm wondering about the context within which he's considering it, because he was saying in regards to like the student services area that nothing has been waived. And so that if we're not providing fully the items in an IEP, that we could be creating compensatory services. And his message was, as board members, see what you can do to please try to get those services out to students. Use some of the small companies that are out there that can provide these things. So that's why I was asking. So I was just, I think the lens through which perhaps the state is looking at.
Sure, and that can really be determined until the very end.
Right, yeah.
Based on lack of access to FAPE and regression, it's not a one-to-one payback. It's not a matter of, oh, you missed 3 speech sessions, now you get 3 speech sessions added on. That's not how it works.
No.
Well, maybe it's an odd way for him to present it, but anyway.
Yeah, it's only a 1-for-1 if we truly deny them, and we're not.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But it probably is fair to say that we're going to have a lot of work to do with everyone.
Yes.
Okay. If everyone's good with this conversation, we can move on to audit. The audit committee, just 2 of the board members, Debbie and I met with Mike Campo very briefly via Zoom to discuss the process, how they're working forward through all of this situation. He talked to us a little bit about the governance letters. He talked to us about the financials. So quick summary. For June 30th, 2019, the financial statements are complete. The governance letters are complete. The boards will be receiving, or should be receiving, their financial statements. Michael Campo, the partner from Plodzik Sanderson, is willing to join one of our remote meetings in June to talk to the SAU board regarding the financials and to present them and to answer any questions. And he's also able to do that for the other boards, so those can be discussed locally. The governance letters, I think I can send out to you. I don't think you've received those yet, so those would just be areas where they've made some notes around things they'd like to have addressed. They'll let you know if it's like a repeat comment or something new. And I know that management receives that obviously as well, and they work on it too. So that's pretty much where we are right now. They did say, you know, going forward, they're doing as much remote as they can, sending their docs, you know, electronically, and perhaps sending one person, one auditor in to just pick things up and bring them back and trying to control documents that way. So they're also working in a new situation. And he did say in some areas, you know, it's not that bad. There are some things they can incorporate going forward. So that's what you can expect going forward. The audit committee needs a community member from Stratford and a community member from Nottingham. So we will be, you know, at the last meeting, we weren't sure who we would need. Now we know, so we'll be advertising for those members, making it slightly broader so we can attract more people, hopefully. And then the audit committee will be meeting probably with management and the auditors to talk about the engagement coming up for the period ending June 30th, 2020. And that's pretty much where we are. Debbie, did you have anything else from our meeting to add? You're muted. Okay.
Sorry. Okay, I think the governance letter really sums up things. So that was good to actually to review that, areas that we need to improve on. We're going to get a few additional pieces of information, such as, you know, some of our IDA grants, they weren't submitted for reimbursement in a timely manner. So then some of the money had to come out of the general fund. So we're looking into exactly how much money that was, and, you know, where those grants were used for. So if districts have to be billed back or whatever, I don't know. The auditors are looking into that. But we will have Michael Campo here. We're supposed to have him here in June. So people should really look through, especially read through the governance letter. That really summarizes a lot of it. The audit can look overwhelming, and get your questions ready for him. But Bruce, you said you had some questions about the audit.
Well, I was looking for the governance letter, and I'm sorry I didn't know it was still coming. I thought it was already in this packet or missed in this packet.
Yeah,
I'm going to forward it.
I thought it would be in the packet, but there is a soft copy, so we can get it sent out.
Okay. So I do have a
Bruce,
question.
I'm sending it to you right this second. Yeah.
The budget that that I thought would be in the financial report, but on page 22, Mr. Waring, of the budget that we received, and I believe it was on another page too. Could you tell us what the indirect $4,716 of indirect costs was spent on? Did that come across? Is that
You're muted, Glenn.
Glenn, you're still muted.
Sorry about that. So the indirect costs there are expensed to each of the grants. That's actually an administrative piece that every grant has built into it that to cover administrative costs. So it's actually revenue that moves back to the general fund.
I understand that. So how was that paid out? Who was it paid in a salary? Was it paid in materials?
No, it's just my understanding it's a straight administrative cost that is expensed to the grant, and it comes in as a revenue on the SAU revenue side in the general fund.
Can I clarify? Bruce, if you look at page 18 of your packet,
Got it?
Go 4 lines down from the top.
Yeah.
So that's where your indirect cost revenue is booked when it comes in. And then it offsets.
Page 13, Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was
13. I'm sorry, Bruce.
That's okay.
There's a line through the, sorry.
That makes it look like an 8. I get it.
I'm sorry about that.
Right. I see that.
All right.
My question was, if it's an administrative fee, can you explain that?
Well, indirect costs, they determine what your indirect cost rate based on your, actually that information comes from the DOE 25s. And so they give you your rate, the DOE gives you your rate every year and it changes every year. When we build the budget, if your total budget, I'm just gonna say, let's say your total budget is 2 million, and that's divided by, the district appropriations and apportioned out to each district, right? The indirect cost revenue offsets that. So your appropriation is a little lower.
So you're saying in the budget that was presented back in December, you deducted an amount of indirect cost before the budget was accepted by the board?
We projected what the revenues would be for the indirect cost under the revenue section of the budget, and then offset that amount by your local load.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Well, it does make sense if that's the way it worked.
That is the way.
Debbie, can you ask the auditor that if the indirect costs are additional on top of what's happening in the budget or were built into it? I just want to make sure, Scott.
Yeah.
In the past, some indirect costs were used for other things other than the intended use.
No, since I've been around, we book them into your revenues.
Okay.
Project them that way. But you're
Okay.
more than welcome to check with the auditor because I know what the answer is going to be.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Yep.
So Debbie will follow up on that question.
Right. And I did just send you the governance letter, Bruce.
Okay.
I sent you the governance letter.
Okay.
So we're going to send the governance letter for the SAU financials to everybody. And then the governance letters for the individual districts to those districts. If you do look at the packet that you received in the mail for the SAU financials, you will see that in addition to the audit for the SAU, because the grants exceeded on a consolidated basis $750,000, there also needed to be a single audit of the grants themselves. And if you look to the back of your financial packet for the SAU on page 35, you will see that information. Then on 37, you'll see the auditor's reports and notes on those items. And again, on 39, I would say, look at page 39, just for a quick summary, 37, 35 for the single audit information. And that's audited as well for internal controls and so forth, and if there are any material weaknesses. So those are things that I think the board should read through and become familiar with and have their questions answered on that. And there are also in the governance reports that you'll receive will be attached the adjusting journal entries. So the way that it works at the end of the period, you come to a trial balance and the auditors, do their work, set their scope, do their testing, and then they submit journal entries, and those adjusting journal entries are made. So you'll have copies of those as well. Did everyone get the SAU packets? Okay. All right. So are we okay on audit at this point? And is the board comfortable with having the audit partner here for the June meeting to answer questions?
Yes.
Okay. And if you have questions regarding anything in the audit, you can direct them to your member on the audit committee, and we can we'll submit those in advance to ensure you have your answers. Okay. All right. Next item is the manifest, the DocuSign discussion. We had touched on this at the last meeting, and it is RSA 197C, and it speaks to the fact that the treasurer have a lot of discretion around funds in each of the districts, and they're an elected position, but they also cannot pay out without board approval. So boards authorize payments. So therefore, an audit item that you can have is if you are signing checks and making payments before boards see the manifest. And we know that that happens sometimes with payroll, but with DocuSign, it hasn't been happening. But anyway, the recommendation would be that the manifest go out to the joint board, that you review in the same manner that you review your manifests now for your local districts. And I believe RSA 197 calls for at least 2 signatures. And at that point, the treasurer could then go in and do their piece, review things and sign checks and so forth. So that's the question at hand for the board.
So Sue, are you saying that, and I think it's a good idea, but are you saying that when Charlene sends out the manifest or the other person who sends out payroll, that before I sign it, other board members need to look at it and approve it?
Yes, before you sign checks, yes. Just like you would at the local level. And that's why DocuSign is going out. Otherwise, you're signing all these checks with no board authorization. And it is an item that's been noted on the audit for some time. And now with DocuSign, it can be easily addressed. I think Northwood does it with 2 or 3 signatures. Or when you're not using DocuSign, when you're just physically meeting. But none of us have any problems with it now because we can get all of the material electronically.
My question is, why don't we just continue with the DocuSign if it's working well? I thought that's what we had kind of come to last time.
Well, we're not doing anything right now at the SAU level for that. So there's no SAU board review prior to the treasurer signing checks. That's all we're thinking.
So should we do some, these things usually come, just a couple of days before they're due in the email. So I just wonder if we should just appoint maybe 1 or 2 other people that will, and have more signature lines on it, because it's one of those things where, payroll is due on Friday. You get the list on Wednesday. People have to be paid on Friday. So you can't wait a week before it's signed.
That's why you
know
don't
what I'm saying?
need 2. You only need 2. You wouldn't be waiting for a quorum of the joint board. You just need 2 signatures.
Yeah, if I could chime in for a sec, I feel that if you just send it to all the board members, the first 2 that have a chance to review it and DocuSign it, that's going to speed it up rather than waiting for 2 appointed people who might potentially look at it, more in depth, perhaps. But I think we all take that responsibility pretty seriously when we get the DocuSign emails, because just for example, if you've got a pretty tight turnaround and you have 2 people and one of them just whatever is traveling for some reason or something comes up, they can't get to it. I think just sending it out to the full joint board and waiting for the first 2 is probably going to be the way to go.
Yeah, I agree. I think that different people might have availability different weeks, and we can all share the load. That's what we do on a local level, and it seems to work really well.
Okay. Christine, did you have anything, or are you good? You're good. Okay.
So Glenn, you would probably then just have to add 2 more lines to those documents for signatures.
I'd actually probably need to have a total of 15 lines and send it to all 15 representatives of of the joint board.
Oh,
And-
I see what you're saying,
And the
right?
first
right.
two that electronically sign will then, in essence, complete the manifest that then will allow the treasurer to sign the checks and checks to be issued.
And I need to sign the manifest as well before the checks are issued.
Right, so you'll be
Right.
included in the 15.
Okay, okay.
And you won't actually need to sign the manifest anymore. Your duty is really only to sign the checks as the treasurer.
Well,
So,
the way things have been going is I have to approve the manifest. And since we've had this social distancing, I then, once I've gone through it all, unless I see some checks that have to be held, which I have, then I call Charlene or I write to Charlene and say, okay, Mary can sign them. I've just gone through it all. I've signed the manifest. I'm okay with that. I might say, pull this one check. Do not sign this check right now. I need more information, but the rest can be signed.
I understand that's how it has been done in the past, but my understanding is that this discussion this evening is to actually change that process. And what I heard was that the manifest is going to be sent to all 15 members of the joint board. It's going to require 2 signatures of 2 board members to complete the manifest that then will allow the treasurer to sign and issue the checks per the order of the board.
Which is exactly what we do with the other boards. And I don't think that your role wouldn't be diminished at all, Debbie. You could still sign the manifest and do your review.
No, I just want to make sure that I think it's important that I sign the manifest because I need to make sure that there's a reason to sign all the checks. And by going through the manifest and approving it, it's sort of, that's sort of my, because of the way things have been going with not being able to go into the SAU, that is how I show Charlene I'm okay with now going forward. I've signed the manifest and I've called you and I said, and I would say, have Mary sign the checks because I'm not going in to sign the checks. Mary's signing the checks. So I don't know, whatever.
I think it's no different, Debbie. The only difference is that the
Okay.
board will be seeing the manifest prior to the check being signed, as opposed to
Okay.
after. Like, for instance, today we got a list of the manifest, which is good, but
Okay.
now that we have DocuSign, we can get in front of it, and this will be an audit item that will be resolved because we're
Right.
paying funds without board approval. And you're a board member too, so certainly you should be reviewing the manifest and determining if you have any questions or you think that something, could be held for a service or what have you. Certainly that doesn't change.
Right.
May-
All right,
may
well, I just want to make sure that people take their time and really go through the manifest before they sign it. That's all.
Okay. And Glenn, you had something?
Yeah, I think where this is kind of getting into the gray area is that the joint board in the SAU, where Debbie is a board member and also the treasurer, we're kind of blurring the lines of what the duties of the treasurer and the school board are. So I might make a recommendation that you consider appointing a treasurer that is not a school board member, and then Debbie, you would still have all of the authority to review the manifest as you do now. But the way the statutes read, the treasurer is to issue checks per the direction and directive of the school board members. So once 2 board members have signed the manifest, the order now is then for the treasurer to issue those checks so directed. So there definitely is, where you're wearing 2 hats, there is some gray area that probably needs to be corrected.
Well, let's take that as an action item to look into. I know the board, as long as I've been on it, always had at the joint level anyway, appointed a treasurer from the board, but we can certainly look into that. But I think for the simple piece right now, just to get the audit issue resolved, I think it would be good to just have the board review the manifest prior to the checks being signed.
Right, I totally agree with that. My concern is, in hearing Debbie's concern, is that we at the SAU office are going to receive a manifest that could have at least 2 signatures, maybe more than that. One of them may not be Debbie's signatures, And now we've got checks that are being withheld that aren't following the directive of the joint board.
Is there
So
a way in DocuSign to require one of those signatures to be Debbie's? So we just have one other board member sign and then it will hold, like it needs her signature before it would be approved? I wonder if that's a setting we can look into? Because that could cover the two
Yeah, unless
signatures
the
needed, but one would have to be hers.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. And I think the reality is she has to sign the check. She's been delegating that to the deputy just because of the COVID issue, although I'm sure the other treasurers are still signing. So I'm sure there's a mechanism for Debbie to be able to sign. But I think I can assure you that if the treasurer in Nottingham or Northwood have a concern, they're waiting for the manifest to be signed, that yes, it's authorized. If they perceive there's an issue, they certainly resolve it before they sign the check. And I don't think Debbie would be doing anything different than that. But if you want to wait on it and continue to do it the way we've been doing it until we can answer that last question, we can do that as well. I honestly think it's probably a pretty simple matter just to have the board look at it, get 2 signatures, and then the treasurer to be able to do their job as listed in RSA 197.
I agree, Sue.
All right, I'll make a motion then that the SAU joint board, SAU manifests, we'll just follow a similar procedure to what the local districts do. The manifest will go to the board for 2 signatures, and the treasurer will continue to review the manifest as well and ask questions and sign as they see fit.
I'll second.
Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion?
I just want to point out too, I believe this is, you're saying RSA, this is state law, and it's also something that's come up from the audit committee. So I think this is probably a good procedure, so.
Mm-hmm.
We'll roll call through if there's no other comment. All right, Stephanie? Did I? Okay.
Yes, but she's muted.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, wasn't tracking. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Shirley?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Okay. Christine?
Yes.
Susan? Yes. Roz?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
Debbie?
Yes.
Misty? Misty?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Erica?
Yes.
All right, so that motion carries with 12 in favor. All right. So that's the manifest item. And then moving on to SAU goals. What we'd like to do tonight is have the management committee report to you verbally. And the management committee is going to be talking about goals, the superintendent evaluation tool, and also a little bit on transition. So we're going to kind of grab 3 items there.
Yep.
We met today, and the committee has agreed that they will have a standing meeting. It will be the 3rd Monday of every month, so a week following our meeting. They will then follow up on items that the joint board has asked them to look into, and they will have a report ready so that it will be able to go into the joint board packet for your review. So that is a little bit of a change that will happen. I think it will be very advantageous. And now I'll turn it over to the committee members to let you know and give you reports on these items.
Okay, so today we were just kind of outlining where we want to start with evaluating everything. And to start with that, in part with the transition piece, we are going to look to collect data on the collective SAU obligations, including contracts and leases, especially those that will go beyond next year. We're going to analyze the apportionments from going from 3 towns to 2 and how that's going to affect each town. And look at the budgets and the grants and that as well. Let's see. The other thing we wanted to do with that is review the incurred cost versus lost revenue due to COVID. We talked about that a little bit with the Title I versus Title II to see how that was going to be affected in the CARE funds. And review SAU job descriptions with the breakdown of responsibilities, again, just to kind of analyze how things are going to be affected going from 3 down to 2. From that, Stratford is also going to create a transition group to oversee their specific end to it and report back to the group. Another piece we were talking about is the evaluation tool, in part with our goals and doing our evaluations. We're happy with the tool, but we wanted to reflect on the scale. Similar to what we had used on a local level, 2 of the choices are like excellent and outstanding, and we wanted something that was just a more leveled scale. So we're going to look into that and bring that to the board at a later date. And we also wanted to touch base with the board about feedback on goals and doing the superintendent evaluation in June virtually, possibly, since it looks like we won't be able to get together, and see what feedback the board had on prioritizing these initiatives that we're working on. So I think that was the basis of it, and just kind of open up for discussion if you guys have any feedback, requests, or questions.
I like everything that I heard you say, and I was just going to ask if when you look at the superintendent evaluation tool and you're looking at the scale, if you could also take a look at the questions. I remember as a board, there were a couple of questions we felt didn't apply at all, and that maybe we could just remove.
Okay.
Sue, I think you probably know what I'm talking about. So I'm not asking you to just like revamp the whole thing, but I think there were a couple that just really didn't apply, and so maybe just simplifying it a little.
Yeah, it is in the packet, the blank format. We did like the indicators of success, and most of the feedback that we received from the board at the prior meeting was around the scale, particularly between 1 and 2. So, but yeah, we can also, if there are particular items, you know, within the review itself, we can look at those as well.
Yeah, Sue, once I get the copy that you're sending me, I'll be able to better tell you, I think, which items it was that we were talking about, but
okay,
just a couple.
Right.
Another thought we had about that, Christine, was possibly adjusting the scale to include a not applicable. So we wouldn't really have to adjust the, I mean, either way, it depends on, but we did talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that could be a simple solution.
Right, and Kelly had found a white paper on this very matter from the school administrators national level. So we'll be looking at that as well. And in terms of the evaluation itself, Scott and I had spoken briefly, and we know that there was a motion made at the prior meeting, you know, with a sense that, you know, try to get this finished up by June. And so I believe the takeaway that I had from speaking with Scott was that we kind of push it into early June and hope that at that point perhaps there can be some in-person, but if not, then we would use remote to do that. Is that pretty much your thought on it, Scott?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe that the motion included that we would make a decision at our June 8th meeting
If we couldn't
on
get it
how
done.
we wanted to proceed, because we would know better if we would be able to meet in person.
Yeah, so if we can't do anything before then, we can hold it till we talk about it as a board.
I think Troy might have skipped over a little bit. Misty was going to speak to the goals piece.
Right.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, basically what the management committee would like to do is take input from the board to be sure that we are prioritizing the areas that the board feels are most important. But the goals that we would like to start sort of drafting and bringing forward would be around the transition from 3 districts to 2. Really hone in on our requirements and obligations around the financials. So I think those governance letters we spoke about earlier will be helpful with that piece. And then any other input by the board around goals, we welcome.
Right.
I think an important piece would be implementing procedures so that things will happen like seamlessly, naturally.
And I think that may fall under those governance letters, but I haven't read them yet.
It is.
I agree with you.
And then as far as transition, we thought that what we should do is have a standing item on the joint board agenda to have discussions. And then at the direction of the joint board itself, the management committee can come back and do a little legwork and then report that back to the joint board for further thoughts and conversations, so that we're ensuring that we get all the pieces, you know, that we understand the transition of what Stratford is going to be doing as they leave and what that may mean, what all these contracts look like. And I think it will kind of become more clear as we begin to discuss it, what all the pieces are going to look like.
And also too, at our local meetings, take any feedback, like if there's anything specific to Northwood that we have questions, you guys can give that to me and we'll bring that to those management meetings and discuss it there.
Do you have a timeline in mind to present to the joint board a draft of goals or a timeline for when we finalize goals?
We were hoping we could bring a draft back to you at the next meeting with a little guidance from the board tonight about some areas that you would like to see addressed, anything new or different, or anything you'd like to see perhaps removed. And then we'll collaborate with the superintendent and bring back some draft goals. I would imagine we're not reinventing the wheel, so a lot of them will be similar.
So will you send me a copy of the existing goals or the goals from last year so I can look through?
Yep.
Thank you.
And as Misty had mentioned, we were talking about the 2 additional areas, maybe having some goals around financial piece and transition piece. And we didn't know if the board perhaps had additional thoughts. You could probably talk about that at your local meetings and then bring it forward to your members and we can work on that. But we would be planning on meeting next week and starting our work on this so that we can have a report in the packet. So is that good? Everyone's...
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, so that takes care of the items 11 and 13. And if you want to revisit 13 before we break, you know, obviously we will do that. I think 14 has been taken care of as well. And now we would go to number 12 for the SAU leave on page 22.
So your SAU lease is on page 42 with the accompanying email and justification. Except the dates are wrong in the lease. So let me get back to Linda about that because we're looking.
Yeah, we're a year behind.
Yeah.
Scott?
Yeah. I'll let the business administrator handle this one. How's that sound?
So there's actually 2 agreement extensions in here because when we looked into it, we realized it was discovered that the lease extension for the lease period that we are currently now in was never formally extended. So we included it in this packet for the board to decide whether they want to go retroactive for the lease period of 1920, but certainly for the lease period of 2021. We certainly at least need to get that signed and put into place.
I know that I do remember having a motion made to extend it for 1 year at one point, so I do remember doing that. But
Yeah. I do
Our
too.
records, the records we could at least that were presented to me were the last time that it was voted on and extended was for the 18-19 school year lease period.
So I have a question. As far as the date on page 44, the ending date, I know that we need to, I think it should be June 30th because Stratford will not be part of the SAU in July. And I think, I know that's one of the things the management committee discussed, looking at different ways of things that the SAU may look into as far as coming up with a plan, what it would look like to have 2 districts rather than 3. And one of the suggestions was possibility of moving into a different space that costs less money. So I would say that we change that date to June 30th, 2021.
Well, I don't know if we really had the discussion so far about whether or not we're going to be moving spaces. I think that one of the things we could do is just to adjust the apportionment if we need to for that last month for now, just as another alternative of how we could handle it if we wanted to adjust that last month out of Stratford's apportionment.
right. So right now, looking at the manifest that came today, we're paying, I think we were paying like 48,000 a year. I'm trying to remember the exact amount now.
It is
4,038 or something.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this, we think, would bring the rent up to 4,064
Correct.
for 1 year.
Correct. For the 2021 lease period.
Okay.
I really think it would be cleaner to end, if we're going to sign this as an SAU, to sign it ending June 30th, 2021.
I'm going to agree with that too. I just think, we're losing one of our schools at that point. It makes sense to end the lease there if we can.
I would just point out that this is an extension of an existing lease, and the lease term is from August 1 through July 31. So I believe if you're going to need to change the dates, you would need to have a new lease agreement from start to finish. This is just a clause in the current lease agreement that allows for 1-year extensions of the existing lease.
Yeah, I think we might be making it more complicated by trying to change the date.
Maybe what we do,
I think that we could probably get the extension. I think it's just, I don't think they'll have a problem giving us changing the language.
You know what I think might be easier though, is just to keep it the lease term that it is, and have a motion with this board itself that the last month will be handled by Nottingham and Northwood.
I agree.
Or do something like that, so we don't have to go and renegotiate and have to have legal costs and all that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you need a motion then?
I would ask Glenn, would that work, do you think?
Yeah, that'd be fine. Again, because the cost of the July 1, the July lease payment in 2021 would be in the Stratford school budget, or would not be in the Stratford school budget for that piece. It would be in the SAU, and that SAU budget's only going to be apportioned to 2 towns for 2021.
So we're already set with that. It just seems simpler.
Right, 21, 22, right.
As long as it's clear in the motion, just because when we get to contracts and things, that could be a problem.
Okay. I'm going to make a motion to sign the extension of the lease agreement with the understanding that once the Stratford School Board leaves the SAU, that they no longer have responsibility for paying the lease.
I'll second.
Okay, and so Stratford will be leaving June 30th, 2021, just for clarification.
Right, so it'd just be that last month.
Right.
Okay, so we've got the motion and the second. Do we have any additional discussion? Okay, hearing none, we will roll call through this vote as well. Stephanie,
Yes.
Shirley,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Susan, yes, Rosalind,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Debbie,
Yes.
okay, Bruce,
Yes.
Misty,
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
That motion carries with all members in favor, and basically will extend the lease for one more lease term, the last month of which Stratford will not be responsible for, as they will not be in the SAU at that time.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have the committee reports. We had the audit committee and the management committee already report out. Were there any other committees that wish to report? All right. Your future meeting agenda items or any other items you'd like to discuss at this time?
I've got your
So-
auditor, right?
Sorry?
Yeah.
I have your auditor on the agenda.
Yes,
Next agenda, yes?
yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
The superintendent evaluation should be on the June agenda as well, so we can make a final decision about how that will be delivered.
Right, and goals. And I think we're going to keep transition as a standing item.
Yep.
Is there anything else that you wish to have on your next agenda? All right. Okay, so our next meeting date would be June 8th, and we will have we'll have Michael Campo present to answer questions. For action items, I have send the governance letter to all at the SAU, and then send governance letters to the individual boards for each of their districts. Are there any other items that you wish to have for action items to be sent out between meetings? Okay, we'll receive feedback from the local boards, if there is any regarding goals. The management committee will be taking those items up next week and providing reports. So if there's.
I do have a question, Sue.
Mhm.
Nate, will you have the application for the next IDEA grant done by June? Is he still on, Nate?
Yes, he's right there, bottom left.
The application? No, the allocations don't come out until July. Well, that's probably when they'll have the allocations out to us. They shoot for June, but we usually get them in July.
Yeah, we don't even have, we don't even have the common pages of the JEPA statements yet, which we usually have by now.
Okay.
The assurances to bring to the boards, we don't even have right now.
Okay. Okay. Oh, gosh. Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Well, the other item I think that we wanted to see, it just came to me on the business side, the costs that have been incurred thus far that were submitted April 15th, and if there are any additional costs up to that point, we'll look at.
I think too, in that piece, we had said we wanted to look at it. You're talking about the cost in relation to COVID-19, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so we had noted that we wanted to review them broken down like SAU and then by local. And then if we could also see them based on incurred costs versus lost revenue costs. So things that were contract fulfillment versus new items. If we could see it that way, it would just be helpful for us to kind of review.
Okay, thank you, Shirley.
Glenn, did you hear that?
I certainly did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Okay. All right. Are there any other, we've got future meeting audits, super eval form, goals, transition, and then the COVID review cost, if you will. We have our action items that we just talked about. Is there anything else? All
I think
right.
Mr. Bruning said that he needed a non-public.
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
Well,
I
before
like
you go
that.
on, you have a member of the audience. I don't know if you want to, because
Oh,
I
yes, that's true.
don't know if you want to do public comment before we do any of that.
Sure, let's do public comment
Yes, that would be
first.
good.
Okay.
Let her go.
So we do have one member of the audience. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Please state your name and address if you have a public comment.
No public comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What do you need the motion for?
A and C.
Make a motion, we go into non-public under RSA 91-A:3, 2A and C.
Second.
Second.
I'm
Sorry,
sorry,
Brian.
who was the second? Who was the
Got
second?
it. Me,
Yeah.
second.
Brian, okay.
Just pick one. It'll be fun.
All right, we're gonna roll call in. Brian,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
okay, thank you. Shirley,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
okay, Christine,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Susan, yes, Rosalind,
Yes.
Bruce,
Yes.
Misty,
Yes.
Erica,
Yes.
Debbie. All right,
Yes.
so we are in non-public. So we are out of non-public at 8:29. Motion made by Christine. Actually,
Yep.
Christine and
That's
seconded. Okay. And 8:29, we're out of non-public. While in non-public, no votes were taken and a personnel matter was discussed. Is there any business to be brought before this board at this time? Any additional business?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank
Motion
you.
to adjourn.
Second.
All right,
Who's the second, Misty?
Yeah.
okay. We have to roll call that as well.
Boy.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Shirley,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Susan, yes, Rosalind,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Bruce,
Yes.
Debbie,
Yes.
Misty,
Yes.
Erica.
Yes.
All right, meeting's over at 8:30.
Night, everybody.